Time to turn our attention to the French newspapers now. Elena with us here on set. French Socialists, they've had their summer party conference this weekend. Surprisingly, what a surprise. It's the big story again here in France. Who is going to become the French Socialist leader as they go into the elections next year?
Yep, that makes all the front pages. But some of the newspapers are starting to worry that the public might not be quite as engaged in this contest as the papers themselves are. Libération this morning headlines on a front page of François Hollande with the title, "Can Martine Aubry beat him?" But inside the paper, they're not really talking about the different conflicts between the different candidates. They're talking about whether or not the public is actually engaged enough in this primary process, which is a big flagship move for the Socialists to allow the whole electorate to vote who's going to be the next Socialist candidate, as opposed to just the party members. Inside the paper, they say they need to get at least 1 million people to participate in this election out of an electorate of something like 16 million registered voters, because if any less than that, and it just won't look credible, whoever is elected as a socialist candidate needs to start from some kind of platform. This election is meant to give them a push to combat Nicolas Sarkozy, and the paper says they just won't get that unless they can get more people engaged and interested in the voting process. It says that even though the majority of French people tell pollsters they want to see a socialist president, most of them don't really have any strong views on which candidate they want it to be. So the Socialists have still got their work cut out between now and the election on October the 9th to actually get people to vote in it.
It's getting close, isn't it, October the 9th? OK, that's the left-wing paper. Right-wing paper, the Le Figaro, perhaps not surprisingly, they're kind of picking out the differences, aren't they, between the candidates?
Yes, Le Figaro is interested on its front page, as it has been, we must admit, just about every day over the last few months, in the differences between the different candidates on the Socialist side. They've got explosive primary up for the Socialist Party as a headline this morning. Inside the paper, it's François Hollande, really, who gets attacked by their editorial, so that clearly shows he is leading in the polls, otherwise the right-wing papers wouldn't feel the need to lay into him quite so strongly. Today, they say he spent his entire political career spectating and commentating on politics from the sidelines. They say the reason why he's popular is because he's never made an unpopular decision, but that's because he's never been in a position of power that required him to make difficult decisions. They say the world has changed a lot since he first started commentating on politics, and it's Nicolas Sarkozy that knows a lot more about that than Hollande does, because he's had to make the difficult decisions in recent years, whereas Hollande has just stood back and commentated.
OK, another story which is in all the papers today, as you were mentioning earlier. We were covering this last week a little bit, weren't we? Christine Lagarde, new head of the IMF. She's trying to get world leaders to think a little bit more about how to get the economy going again, isn't she?
Yes, the business paper's headline on this morning. If we look at La Tribune, they opt for Lagarde, Bernanke and Trichet tell political leaders to act now as a headline. On the inside, they focus on Bernanke's announcement that there's going to be no more quantitative easing, at least not imminently, in the US, saying that political leaders have for too long relied on the idea that their central bankers will fiddle with monetary policy and sort out the things that they can't sort out at legislative level. And they say, you know, the paper says that now the time has come for governments to make some serious policy decisions about this and realise that there's just only so much the central banks can do. Another big current topic on the economy is how much to target the very wealthy. This is quite a hot topic at the moment around the world. Here in France, François Fillon announced a special new wealth tax on the very wealthy last week. And in the UK, George Osborne has struck a deal with Switzerland to try and tax some of the money being creamed off into bank accounts there. So that's made a lot of the papers' front pages today as well. The other business paper, Les Echos, has opted for the moment of truth for tax loopholes and havens as its front page headline. So they're quite keen on this clamping down on tax havens policy, saying France loses huge amounts of money every year and it's undemocratic. But Le Parisien is a little bit more worried about the effects of this tax loophole crackdown on ordinary middle-class households. They've got a threat for domestic workers as their front page, because here in France, employers can claim tax relief on domestic workers like au pairs. And the paper says 1.7 million jobs for cleaners, carers, au pairs and childminders and so on could be lost if middle-class families are put off from employing them by this crackdown on the tax loophole.
Finally, Elena, you've missed the most important story of the day here in France. Quick mention, it's Elena's birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Had to mention it, embarrass her, here on France 24. Elena,
I'm duly embarrassed.
Good. Elena with the French newspapers this morning.